piss me off. So, like you said, I'm Melvin2001, and today we're going to be talking about using the Metasploit framework to deliver. Meterpreter is the goal at this point. And we're going to be delivering that in a way that is very confusing to antivirus. It makes it just feel weird about itself and question sexuality. So we're going to be talking about the just introduction to payloads if you're an idiot and you don't know what a payload is. We're going to talk about that. We're going to I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know and what some of my FAL guys have helped out figuring out about how antivirus actually does this detection. We're probably wrong, but it seems to work, so that's actually what matters. We're going to talk a little bit about ghostwriting assembly, which we stole that, so that's fun. We're going to talk about the autoit-based method for remote loading of payloads. And that was actually done by Treefort before he got banned from airports, I think. So that's fine. We also had a custom remote shellcode loader, so it actually pulls shellcode from a remote location and runs it, which is kind of neat. We stole that too, so that's good. And then a custom interpreter for staging. If you're not familiar with staging, we'll talk a little bit about that. Metasploit actually deploys Meterpreter in 2 stages, and we stole that too. So there's kind of a theme going on. So there's a little bit about me. I like to troll a lot, hence the M&Ms. I'm not going to eat those, by the way. This was a complete waste of time. We're from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, so that's fun. I'm at Melvin2001. I'm basically Melvin2001 on everything, so feel free to track me down and I'll ignore you. I am not a programmer, nor am I very smart, but I can pretend to hack. So I guess that makes me a penetration tester. That's safe. That's perfectly safe. It's got the guard, and just call me if you need some more information. So if anyone is, I think Treefort's still with us for now, but he will quickly be bagged up and hauled away to some prison. So the disclaimer, I don't really give a crap, just do whatever the fuck you want. So we're going to go over a couple terms here. A payload, like I said, if you're an idiot, the payload is what's actually executed on the victim. It's the code that you actually send over that's doing the exploitation. How you get that payload over there, that's not really my problem. Now, a signature as far as antivirus is concerned is the set of rules or patterns that they use to actually say this is malicious or this is not malicious. It's just a set of rules that they use to do detection. Heuristics is a little bit different in that it actually has some learning capability where it tries to predict intent and decide whether or not an application is malicious, where it's going is going to be malicious. And similarly, this sandbox and heuristics actually kind of go hand in hand. The sandbox is a protected space where applications can run, where they won't actually affect a system in any way. And a lot of times, as far as antivirus goes, the sandbox is run first, or the application is run in the sandbox first. Heuristics are run on that as it's running in the sandbox, and then it makes a decision whether it wants to pass the control over to the actual operating environment at that point. So, so they really go hand in hand. To have an effective sandbox, you got to have some heuristics behind it to decide whether or not to pass it to the operating system or not. So this is what we are not going to teach you. How to initially compromise a machine. You shouldn't be here if you don't know, I guess. So social engineering, just do it. It's easy. Just tell them you're a vendor. We're also not going to teach you how to write exploits because that's what the Metasploit framework is. We're script kiddies, right? Isn't that why I'm here? You guys invited me. I don't know how that worked out. So we're also not going to teach you how to break into your ex's Facebook because she's over you, man. Just move on. It's getting kind of pathetic at this point, and it's the beard. Shave the beard, hit the gym, delete your Facebook, and call a lawyer. Those are the rules. So these are the operating principles that I've been working on. this is probably all wrong, and if it's wrong, just tell me, that's fine, but it seems to be working, so I'm just gonna go with it. Meterpreter is a great tool. It makes penetration testing way faster and way less effort, which is great. That's what I like about Meterpreter. Antivirus is crap, generally speaking. It's a layer, right, guys? It's a layer. Guys, anybody? No? Okay. Programming is really hard. And it's not fun. No, it's not. You're wrong, and you should feel bad. You should actually feel terrible about that. Yeah. Programming. Anyways, stealing other people's work is way easier than programming. And there's people that think programming is fun, and you should steal their code. And the easiest way to steal people's code is to take it. That's step one, take it. And we'll go over a little bit more of that. So how to steal stuff. So I guess what it really comes down to at the end of the day is everyone here can probably do this better than I can. I'm not very smart. So you should totally do this better than me. I want to hear opinions. I want to hear funny stories. I want to get people kind of going with this because basically this whole thing is a journey for us. It was me and Treefort and Smirker and Beeper. We were all just kind of when we were having like dude mountain, it was awkward. So during the cuddling, we talked about some of these ideas. It's the postcoital bliss, the thing. So we had discussed some of this stuff because we were, Meterpreter kept getting popped all the time, and so we were just getting upset. It hurt. It made us feel bad on the inside because it made our jobs harder, and that makes us upset. And then we actually do something for a short period of time until it starts to work, and then we immediately quit doing whatever we were doing because we get bored. So for the love of God, just try some of this stuff out. Send us some ideas and let us know how it works for you. We want to hear some funny stories. So let's talk a little bit about encoders. If you're familiar with the Metasploit framework at all, you've probably used the encoders like shellcode, which is spelled wrong. How about that? Anyways. So encoders were never meant to evade antivirus. That's not what they were designed to do. They were actually designed to help get rid of bad characters. And again, if you guys have worked with exploit development at all, you're going to be a little bit familiar with bad characters. The short version of it is that some protocols don't, or some operations don't like having a payload sent to them with certain characters. Null bytes are one of the most common ones that you'll see. So you have to get away, or you have to have a way to get the null bytes out of your payload. So that's what encoders are for. You can tell the encoder what your bad characters are, and then the encoder does its magical bullshit that magically takes the null bytes out. So it's not important. Like I said, I don't really care. So that's what they were actually designed to do. Now, things like shellcode actually do some fancy bullcrap that it changes every time that you use shellcode. You can use shellcode 2 different times against the same payload, and you'll get 2 different results because it actually mutates depending on how it actually is encoding it. And because of that, its ability to do that, it actually confuses antivirus because antivirus is generally stupid, and it's a layer, guys. So people got this idea in their head that shellcode is antivirus evasion, which sort of, yes, it does kind of do that, but not very well. Because even shellcode has a decoder stub at the beginning of it to actually decode the encoding. And that can actually still be decoded. And there is actually some antivirus that actually has shellcode capability that it can decode it and still figure out what your payload is. So encoders, they do some cool stuff. Test tools everywhere. So our first idea when we started having these issues with our payloads getting popped, especially in Meterpreter, was ghostwriting assembly. So the idea behind it is you generate shellcode, and then you run the shellcode through a disassembler, and you can see the assembly instructions. You can then modify the assembly instructions to do some like bizarre push pop bullshit. It just confuses the signature detection. It really doesn't do anything for heuristics. Heuristics is advanced enough at this point to kind of ignore the nonsense that you're putting in there, and it still kind of pops some of the stuff. So we've had some luck with actually putting the files on the file system, but then once you try and run them, the heuristics and sandboxing kicks in and kind of pops a lot of this stuff. So, but this was our first attempt. This is kind of where we started, because we were like, we have something that doesn't work at all. Where do we go? Let's do some modifications to it. You do a couple easy Google searches, and this is kind of what pops up. So this is, if you look, that link there is actually the source for a neat article that talks about ghostwriting assembly. One thing of note is that when you recompile this using the Msfpayload framework, it actually uses an exe stub that it actually puts the shellcode back into. Well, that exe stub is actually detected by antivirus, not necessarily the shellcode, even at that point. It's the executable that it's wrapping around the shellcode. And because of that, no matter what, you can use no shellcode, and that stub is still going to get detected. So you're starting off with something that's detected before you even put something malicious in it. So doing that, you're going to run into some problems. So I actually came up with a little system that we're about to talk about on how to use a custom executable and then put your ghost written assembly shellcode into that. So I was going to take some screenshots, and that shit's boring, so I just wrote it out. But these are basically the commands that we use. You actually generate the shellcode, and we're actually outputting it to a raw binary file instead of using like a C string or something like that you would actually put into a C file or a Python script or something like that. So, but we're actually outputting it to the raw binary. Then we're using Metasm to actually disassemble it into assembly instructions. So when you look at it down the bottom there, that's kind of what you're going to see is you know, all these assembly instructions. And yeah, we did totally steal this from Pentesky. Like I said, we stole all of this. We just kind of put it all together into a presentation and go talk like we know what we're talking about. So once you open your disassembled assembly, you'll see these instructions, and I don't even know what that shit means. Those are words, and I don't understand. But anytime you see down at the bottom there, you'll see XOR EDI. That's actually clearing out the EDI register. It's setting it to 0, because anytime you XOR something by itself, it turns it all to zeros, right? So when you see that, you kind of know that the register is going to be 0 at the end of the instruction, right? So you can put anything in that register because it's just going to be cleared out anyways. So that's basically what we ended up doing is instead of having the short, you know, 3 lines here, we started adding just random crap to it, and then still at the bottom, it clears out EDI at the end anyway. So we're pushing stuff into EDI, popping stuff out of EDI. I don't know what else is going on because I don't understand any of this crap. And then we just cleared out at the end. So we took, you know, 3 instructions and made it like 9 or 10. So we're just adding stuff to it. Well, that's enough to trip up signature detection on antivirus, because antivirus is generally stupid, but it's later. So after you put the extra characters in, or extra instructions in your assembly, you can actually recompile it. And then these are the instructions that you would use to basically take your modified assembly, and it outputs it to recompiled shellcode, which would be the test.shell file. And this all comes with Msfpayload. By the way, this isn't anything that you know, you're going to have to go find. This is just all just part of the Msfpayload framework. And then we actually, this is the part that I kind of modified a little bit from what you would see if you went to the Pentest Geek website. This is my little bit here. The msfvenom, you can actually take the recompiled shellcode and then put it into PuttyGen. But again, if you're familiar with the Msfpayload framework, this is nothing revolutionary. It's just putting things together in interesting ways that you know, people have done before, but nobody's really documented it in an interesting way or kind of come out and said exactly what's going on. So you know, again, we're basically, after we've hand modified our shellcode, we're then injecting it into, in this case, it's PuttyGen, exe. And we actually do 10 iterations of CarolinaCon9 and then put it into PuttyGen. I've actually had the best success with that. It was actually, we ran it against a recent version of Symantec endpoint and fully patched Windows XP, and it didn't detect anything. So, so here's actually a video of me doing exactly that. So this RAR file that I have there has actually got 4 different versions of ghostwritten files that I've put together. One of them was using the default stub. One of them was using very light obfuscation with the ghostwriting and CarolinaCon9. And then we've got so one of them does not have CarolinaCon9, one of them does have CarolinaCon9, and then one of them has very heavy encoding, like I did a lot of ghostwriting, and then I used CarolinaCon9. So if you see only 3 of them were actually detected, one of them actually stayed there on the desktop. So we did get one that was not detected, and this is a fully patched Symantec endpoint deployment. So we actually had pretty good success with that. And you'll see here, I'm gonna run it in just a second. So, oh, and you can also see the actions that it's taking are a little bit different depending on how the obfuscation actually occurs. You can see that one was cleaned by deletion, the next one was cleaned by deletion, and then I think the last one in the end there actually just gets cleaned. So it actually rips the malicious part out of it. So you can actually run it and not get a shell from it, and it actually cleans the file, so it's kind of neat. So what'll actually happen is when I actually run the shellcode, maybe. I don't know what happened there. Okay then. There it goes. You'll see that, oh, never mind. Basically what happened is let me back up here. What happens is the firewall module of Symantec endpoint actually captures the interpreter coming over and stops it. So it's not the antivirus module, it's the firewall module. So you can see there it says interpreter reverse TCP detected. So it actually, we're talking about a network issue at this point, not necessarily an antivirus issue. So that's kind of interesting, right? So we can actually get execution, but the interpreter is getting caught on the wire. And this is using the reverse TCP interpreter connection. So we're not using HTTPS, and we're also not using second stage encoding. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. No, it's actually using 443, but it's using just the plain reverse TCP. So, all right, so let's move on a little bit. There's just nuts everywhere. So Evan actually, Treefort actually put this autoit stuff together. So when we were kind of working on all this nonsense, we're having deployment issues. We're having trouble getting these executables onto systems, and so we're coming up with these ideas, trying to figure out how can we get a malicious executable onto a system with antivirus and have it not get popped as soon as it hits the file system. So we started thinking, how can we make an executable that doesn't have anything malicious in it to begin with? How can we fetch the malicious part later? Maybe keep it in memory or do some stuff like this. So this is kind of our second iteration where we were going with this stuff, trying to come up with ideas on how we can not have anything malicious in it to begin with and load that stuff in, kind of side load it. So this is kind of where this is going. So if you're not familiar, autoit is a basic like scripting language, and you can actually compile it down, but it's mainly meant for administrators to be able to automate tasks. Now this particular attack method that we use needs an executable, so you need to basically ghost write the shellcode and then generate the executable that you're actually going to deploy. So this isn't loading the shellcode directly, it actually needs an executable that's going to be run. So basically you take this script and then that uses this to basically take your executable, your malicious executable, it encrypts it using AES encryption, and then you can store that on a web server somewhere, either your own web server or someone else's web server, right, guys? And then what it'll do is you can compile this autoit script into an executable and send that over. And that's not a malicious executable. All it does is it fetches a file from the web and runs it. That's the whole thing. It just happens to be that the file that it downloads is encrypted, and then it decrypts it on the file system and runs it. So this was kind of our first iteration of things that aren't doing anything malicious, but they grab stuff that is malicious. So it's kind of a evolution in our thinking. Let's see. Yeah, and so that seems kind of hard. There was a lot of text in that stuff. I don't like text. So Evan actually made a nice GUI interface because we like Windows and GUIs. So to basically generate the whole system is you would put in the top there, you'd put the location of your malicious executable, and then the second one is where you actually want it to put the encrypted version of that executable, and then you can put your own custom AES key. Then the second part of it is this is where it generates the pooper. You use the same output directory. You give it a name. You give it the location of where you're going to host your encrypted file, and you decide what you want it to be named after it pops out. When pooper pops out, you got to figure out what you want to name it. You got to have your same AES key, and then Evan actually did some pretty neat custom obfuscation. So every time you generate one, it actually does a little bit of different obfuscation each time, just to add a little extra pizzazz to it. And then you can actually insert Sharpie into pooper if you're into that kind of thing. So yeah, and then the whole thing becomes deliver the pooper. Pooper actually downloads, and I can't even believe I'm saying this. Pooper downloads the remote payload, the encrypted payload, and then unfortunately it actually puts it on the file system and executes it, which is kind of where the whole thing kind of fell down for us. Because if you have a detected executable, the whole thing's kind of for nothing, right? So like I said, we had some pretty good success with the ghostwriting, but let's see if we can take this a little bit further. So as far as executing shellcode via C#, which this is, there's been a little bit of talk about this on a few different websites, because executing shellcode is actually something that people do sometimes. I don't know if it actually has any real world value, but it has value to me, and that's what matters. So one of our good buddies, Bill Semp, he's actually a programmer and way smarter than me. He's so hard, so very hard. He wrote a nice loader for us that actually downloads shellcode over HTTP and then puts it into read-write execute memory space and executes it. So it never touches disk. It's not in the executable when the executable hits the file system, and it fetches it over HTTP. So this is kind of the next evolution in our thinking, because this has nothing malicious in it when you actually send it out there. So what's going to be detected by AV at this point? There's a few things, but we'll kind of go into that a little bit more. Now, the obvious issues with this is that it requires internet connectivity, unless you can host it somewhere internally if you're doing like an internal pen test, but who doesn't have web access at this point in life? And you need some kind of outbound internet connectivity anyways to get shells, right? You got to have some communication between you and the victim in order to get a shell anyway. So there's going to be some kind of communication here that hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of. But because this is all going over the network, you run into issues with firewalls and intrusion detection systems. So, how do we get around that stuff? So let's go a little bit further. So for this particular attack to work, what we ended up our first experiments with it, we were having some trouble with Meterpreter, just still getting popped all the time. So we fell back to using the standard shell for Windows and over reverse TCP, and we would just upgrade, because there's actually an upgrade functionality in Metasploit, And basically what it does is it loads Meterpreter into a file and then uses like some VB scripts or some other nonsense magic to execute it. And that wasn't getting popped by AV. So we were literally getting a standard Windows shell and then using the upgrade functionality of Meterpreter or Metasploit to get Meterpreter. It took it was like 4, we had to literally type sessions-u and then like whatever session we wanted to upgrade. And that was too hard. I was getting angry that I had to type sessions. It hurt me on the inside. So this actually worked really well, like scarily well, but it still upset me. Made my white guy bone upset, I guess. I don't know how that worked out, but life should be way easier for me just going there. But this is kind of where we ended up with it. We started using HTTPS instead of reverse TCP, which that kind of has some issues too. If people are doing, HTTPS man in the middle at their own offices and stuff, you can actually still catch this with intrusion protection and intrusion detection systems. But we're using CarolinaCon9 25 iterations of it to actually generate our shellcode. If on your Metasploit side you use enable stage encoding, what that actually does is the second stage of Meterpreter is actually encoded with CarolinaCon9 at that point. And that, so far, has gotten us past every intrusion detection system that we've come across. I think we did get popped. Yeah, it alerted, but it let it through anyways. Yeah, that's nice. So enable stage encoding. Between enable stage encoding and using HTTPS, we haven't gotten stopped thus far. And we've been using this for how many months now in pen tests? Yeah, since January. So yeah, sorry, Kaiser. We're not using it on his clients at all. Yeah, we've been using this in active pen tests since January, and we haven't been stopped at all. We got an alert, one alert. Between the enable stage encoding, which encodes the second stage Meterpreter, and the reverse HTTPS, it really hasn't been detected by any IDS or IPS, but it could be. It could be. That's certainly a possibility. Basically, at the end of that command, you get fancy-looking shellcode, right? So what you do is you host that file on a website, and then our loader actually downloads that into memory, puts it into read-write-execute memory space, and executes it. Now, the benefits of this method: your actual executable never has to change for you to change your shellcode, right? So, in a real-world scenario, you do a huge social engineering campaign, and email goes out to 100 people with this executable in it. I don't know why you would email people an executable, but we'll just go with it. So you've already got this executable out there. It's out in the world. People might be running it right now, and your Metasploit server just takes a shit and it just dies. And so you need to point it to a new server like right now because people could be executing it. Well, all you got to do is upload a new file to the website, and then they'll be pulling down this new shellcode. So you can change your shellcode on the fly, and it'll work with the same executable. So anytime from now on, whenever they run it, they'll just download the new shellcode, and they'll be running your updated shellcode. So that's kind of cool. So you can update it whenever you need to. So you can change it from doing standard Windows shells to Meterpreter shells to HTTPS shells, like all just by updating a new file. So that's really fun. It's more or less undetected at this point. I've tested it with about 10 different antivirus vendors. Nobody's detecting it. So that's a lot of fun. It's also, because it's C# based, it's actually working with Windows 8. And we've tested it, and we've actually got it set so that it will automatically try to escalate itself for UAC. So if they do have administrator privileges when you try and run it, it'll automatically prompt you, would you like to run this as an administrator? And of course everybody's like, fuck yeah, I don't know what this means. Text boxes are scary. Words are hard. And of course, like we just said, Smirker uses this all the time. Poor Detro. Sorry, man, for owning your shit. So let's take a look at kind of how this works in a real world scenario. So hopefully this video works a little bit better. I wouldn't count on it though. So this is me generating the shellcode, and as you can see, I've already generated it 15 times on the screen. Videos are hard, by the way, so give this thing a second to generate. I do, yeah, I was going to put on some dubstep, but then I'd rather punch myself directly in the face. So, oh, come on. I'm gonna drink. This is actually not a video, by the way, it's just a screenshot, and you guys are, no, I'm just kidding. All right, so we got the shellcode generated. That would have been a good troll, I actually should on that. And then what I do is I actually upload the code.txt file to my web server. And then I'll flip over to, I've got an XP box with Symantec, but you guys have already seen that box before. And there's all my other undetected stuff, by the way. Sorry. So there you go, we got the TCP detection again, right? So we're still getting hit on the network at this point, because we're using reverse TCP. So what I'll do is I'll go over to my handler, and kill my handler. The thing's being a prick. Typing is hard too, by the way. Not good at typing. So, and then I'll do the set enable stage encoding, which, like I said, encodes the second stage. Set it to true, and rerun my handler. Flip back over to the XP box, and let's see how Symantec feels about it this time. I think I actually have to kill the, there goes my video again. Did I not get the shell? Ah, here we go. I don't know what's going on with my videos. Videos are hard. All right, so I rerun the code.exe, and as you can see, this time I actually, that was the same error message from before. I just had to close it. And I think I actually have to kill the misbehaving one, because what happens is when Symantec actually catches it, because it like halfway loads Meterpreter the first time, it crashes if it only halfway loads. So I have to kill the misbehaving one from the first time, and then it actually gets a shell. So make sure that you have enable stage encoding going, else it's going to crash, and that makes me sad. Like I said, programming is hard. So there's my shell. Boom. So there's that. So now here's same executable that I just used on Windows XP, and this is a fully patched Windows 8 with Windows Defender. And Windows Defender actually does a pretty decent job at catching some of this stuff. So let's take a look at how this looks on Windows 8. So you'll see automatically tries to do the UAC upgrade. And actually, if they're not an administrator, it won't try. It'll just run as non-admin. So you'll still get a shell, but you won't get an admin shell. But you wouldn't get one anyway, so who cares, right? And you can see the shell came in just fine. So works fine with Windows 8. All right. So that's cool. That was C#. And now the issue with the C#, and if you want to call it an issue, is that you're still loading stage 1, and stage 1 is what gets eaten by antivirus, because that's the shellcode that comes with Metasploit. So that's what everybody's targeting, is the stage 1 shellcode. Now all that stage 1 does, and this is based on work from Egypt. Egypt actually posted from Rapid7, posted on a big email thread about kind of what stage 1 does, because somebody was like, hey, I want to rewrite that stuff. So I stole it. And so here's what stage 1 actually does. It allocates read, write, execute memory space. It fetches the second stage from the handler. It loads the second stage into that memory space that it allocated, and then it executes it. And then after that, the second stage takes over the socket that was being maintained by the first stage, and it's handed over to the second stage, and the second stage kind of carries on from there. So why did they do it this way? Why did they break it up? Well, mainly size constraints, because fitting Meterpreter into the space that you have for a lot of these overflows and that kind of thing, they just didn't have the space anymore. Meterpreter was growing beyond the size that it could. So so they had to break it up. So they started working with these stage payloads. It also gives them flexibility. They can update things a little bit different. It also just makes AV's life easier, I guess. I don't know. So what's actually being detected in stage 1? And again, these are my observations. Whether or not this is true or not, I don't know. But it seems to work for me, so we'll go with it. So the rewrite execute allocation, where it actually assigns a certain area of memory as read write execute, is kind of suspicious. There's valid reasons to do that, but there's a lot more invalid reasons to do that, because it's basically you're taking an area of memory and saying that you're going to load something into it and execute it. It's kind of suspicious. So the general flow of stage 1, where it basically does those things in order, it allocates the memory space, downloads the handler, puts a handler into memory, and then runs it. That sequence of events is kind of suspicious. Now we're talking about heuristics, right? It kind of sees that sequence of events and it's like, hey, I don't think you're supposed to be doing that shit. Seems kind of naughty. So, and then they put the peg in the penis, and it gets. So, again, Bill Sempfan, that guy, he is sexy. So, so this is the actual thread from Raphael Mudge and Egypt. Again, Egypt from Rapid7. So. At the top there's some gentleman, I don't know who that guy was. He doesn't really matter. So again, I stole it from him, but who cares? So it says, I've been looking for an explanation for a long time. Is there a tutorial on how to connect a homegrown binary to the Metasploit handler in a proper fashion so it works? And again, Egypt replies, no tutorials that I know of, but here are the basic steps, where he outlines exactly what happens with stage 1. Connect to the handler, read the length, allocate the buffer, mark it as writable and executed, and then basically feed all of that into the buffer, and then jump to the buffer, which you basically cast it as a function and call it. Boom, you just executed it. And then the few replies into the thread, Raphael Mudge pops out of nowhere, like a boss, and says, if anyone feels like playing, here's a working loader that I just wrote. And I was like, taking that, download. So, so yeah, he actually wrote it. He wrote a C-based stage 1. So instead of having to rely on shellcode that you have little control over as far as ghostwriting and that type of thing that we were doing way at the beginning, we actually have C code that we can do anything with, and we can evade antivirus in any way. We can actually put this in any other project at this point, right? So so I took that. Again, this is how I took it. I took it. So this is where it gets kind of ridiculous. So if you took the C code from Raphael Mudge and you compiled it and put it on a computer with antivirus would pop it immediately, because it was literally doing exactly what the stage 1 payload does. Is it was allocating the memory, putting the Meterpreter into, or downloading the Meterpreter, putting it in the memory, and executing it. So the problem is that's very suspicious, right? So that was being detected by antivirus. So how do we obfuscate that? Now, there's a really good talk by a friend of ours, Cosine, who actually also works at Rapid7, and he had talked about like burning out the sandbox and confusing the sandbox. Sandbox only has a very limited amount of time that it can actually evaluate whether a program is being malicious or not. So one very effective way of getting out of the sandbox is to just waste time, literally do nothing for a certain amount of time. So my first thought, and I felt bad that this actually worked, is, I didn't really feel bad, but what happened is, I was like, how do we waste time? Let's see, let's generate random numbers, right? For generate pi, who cares, right? Just spit dicks out on the screen, I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter, we're wasting time, right? That's the whole thing. So I wrote like a loop that was like, generate a random number between 0 and 10,000. Is that number less than 5? If it's greater than 5, continue the loop. And that worked. That actually, it was 100% undetected after that. but I literally could not get it detected by anything. I'm not a programmer, but I can write a loop. And it was actually really hard too, because I don't know C at all. I don't know any C. And so I was like, how to loop in C. And then I copied and pasted it, and I got around antivirus. And it was awesome. That's not true at all. No, it's pretty true. So, again, encoding the second stage. Encoding the second stage is really important because we're getting caught at the network level. So if we're not encoding, then we're going to get caught at the network level. So then I started asking questions. Can we proxy the connection between Meterpreter, our victim, a proxy, and then Meterpreter, and do some kind of out-of-band encoding on the connection? So even if you're doing HTTPS man-in-the-middle at your office, and they're inspecting that traffic as well, if we're doing some kind of out-of-band unknown encryption, at that point you could do anything you wanted, right? And what intrusion protection system is going to detect that? Okay. So I was going to put a couple more demos. The problem is that when I was going to do my demos, nothing was getting detected. I don't know what happened. Literally a few weeks ago when I was doing all of this work, I was banging my head against the wall because Mudge's loader was getting popped by just about everything. Because when he actually wrote it, and if you go to that email thread where they talk about all this stuff, you can actually see, he says, well, I submitted this to virus total, and it was detected by like 6 or 7 different places, which I think is pretty good, right? Out of 40 some odd things. And so when I started working on it, I was getting popped left and right. I mean, Avast was getting it, ABG was getting it, Symantec was getting it, Windows Defender was getting it, everybody was getting it. So obviously, VirusTotal does that thing they do and sends the signatures out to everybody, and they were detecting on it. So last week, when I was actually putting all my demos together and stuff, nothing was detecting it, and I don't know why. So what happened? So I actually re-uploaded it to VirusTotal, and there's only one detection. And it's some like bullshit antivirus that nobody's heard of was actually detecting it. So what happened, guys? Like, so you can actually, and it may have changed within the last couple days again, but you can actually go download the code straight from Raphael Mudge, compile it, and just be not detected. So I wrote my loop, my fucking loop. Like, I spent time on that shit, and don't laugh. It was hard. And I didn't have to because now it's not detected again. So whatever the fuck that's about. So again, my loops is 100% not detected because I wrote a loop. And literally all I did was I copied and pasted that loop about 6 different times throughout the code to kind of split up the program flow a little bit. Totally undetected. So what's next? What comes after this? Well, the problem is that we're completely undetected. I haven't seen any IDS, IPS, or antivirus that's been able to catch what we're doing. We've actually sent our code and stuff over to some people at some different antivirus places, and they're just like, we'll talk about it. And that's as far as we've gotten. So nobody really wants to talk to us about it, I don't think. So all the code that we use to put all this stuff together is on the GitHub. So you can actually go and review it. I actually have a similar license to Mark's license. If anyone sees Dennis Kuntz using it, please call the police immediately. Seriously, that's not true. So again, Cosine from Rapid7, he did a really cool talk. His shit doesn't work worth anything, but it was a cool talk. And you should totally watch it. It's really, really good. And so you can Google that, because I'm not going to give you a link because I'm lazy. And then again, that thread from Mudge in Egypt is really interesting. There's a few really cool nuggets in there. They talk about some of the underlying stuff that kind of makes all that work. Bill Sempf, big shout out to Bill Sempf. He's an author. Go read his books. They probably have some stuff written in them. And Sempf.net, he's a cool guy. Tell him that Fal sent you, and that we say he's hard and sexy. And then you guys, right? Because like I said, I'm not a programmer, and I'm kind of an asshole. So, do some stuff, and let me know what you're doing, because I want to hear some funny stories, right? If you guys are owning places, I want to hear about it, especially, maybe North Korea. So, antivirus vendors, I apologize. It's, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I'm sorry. But you're going to have to deal with it. And that's my talk. So is there any questions? Yeah. I think I compiled it to .NET 2, I want to say. I think. I could be wrong. Like I said, we had Semp write it. I don't know that shit. That's a hard question. But I think I had it on 2 and 4. I compiled it for both, and I'm pretty sure it worked. It's been a while. I drank a lot this week, or yesterday. So, oh yeah, we'll just go with that. So, try it and let me know. The code's up there, so, go fucking crazy with it. Email us, let me know. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. Say what? Okay, so yeah, he tried it. He said before he was banned. He did it yesterday. He's lying. So yeah, but apparently it works. So, anybody else? No? That was that good. Sorry, guys. Yeah, what's up? Right. Nope. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Just takes a dump. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, if you want to write something up quick and send it to us, we'll put some notes up in the GitHub about it, and we can have it kind of all in one place. That'd be pretty cool. So, anybody else? Anybody want a hug or anything? Hey, what's up? No. Nice. That is way too advanced for me. I wrote a loop one time though. Right. Yeah. I mean, that would probably be cool with the ghostwriting stuff, I imagine. Because if you can see exactly what it's looking at, you know where to put in your nonsense written code, and then you can probably get around that stuff. So that'd be pretty awesome. So again, if you want to send us some info, we'll put it up. What's that? What was it? D split or D Lee? D split. Yeah. Okay. D split. So anybody else? I got some beer to get to. Seriously. Nothing? Awesome. Thanks, guys.